Hey guys, it's Monday Tech Tip Q&A and welcome. I'm going to wait for everyone to get here. Hey Josephine. I'm so glad you can be here with us today. How are you doing? And
Hi.
hey, hi Kristina. Josephine's already here. She
Hey,
jumped in.
Josephine.
So welcome. It is the third Monday and I'm Sarah Walworth. I'm a tech editor.
I'm Kristina McGrath. I'm a knitting tech editor.
And we are here to answer your questions about tech editing, pattern writing, and any other questions that you might have for a tech editor. So feel free to pop them into the comments below and ask us anything. We're here. Hi, Ruth. Hi, Patty. Hi, Simone. I'm so glad you guys are all here. We got some great questions in some private messages, and we'd love to answer them too. So feel free to throw it into the chat if you have a question for Kristina or me about anything related to knitting, tech editing, or knitting, pattern writing, or anything related to that. So we are here to answer your questions. What should we start with? What do you think, Kristina?
Why don't we do the picture one, the photo one?
Okay, so a question that we got was, what is the role of photos and patterns? I've been told by one designer to ignore a photo which clearly shows a different stitch pattern, a different stitch from the pattern, and I find other photos and some patterns really poorly lit or hiding detail. I still find pattern photos very helpful. What do you think? You want to jump on this, Kristina?
Yes, I want to ask everybody first, though. Can you hear Sarah okay? Like, is it just my cord and that's why she sounds weird? Are you guys able to hear her fine? Just let us know. Um, First of all, that point she makes where she was told to um, ignore. Oh, excellent. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Thanks, Joe.
Jesse. If she's told to ignore a pattern photo that doesn't match the stitch pattern in the pattern. So that's a mistake, right? Like that's something your tech editor should catch, that there's a pattern stitch in your photo that doesn't match your pattern. Oh,
That's
thanks
right.
guys. Awesome. Good. So that's a mistake. And the point of a photo in your pattern on a body, hopefully, so that the knitter can see what the project they finish is going to look like, when they're done, so they can have a good sense of what this item will look like when they finish. And so it is good if you have good lighting and if you have the item on a body photographed. It doesn't have to be like amazing, but it
Mm-hmm.
should give a good representation of what the design will be when they're done knitting it.
Exactly. So photos give your knitter a visual representation of what the sample looks like on a body or even laid flat if it needs be. Um, but it also gives the knitter a goal. So this is what I'm making. This is what it's going to look like. And I would highly recommend, if you are doing any photos in your patterns, that you don't include just one, that you also include some photos that have some detail. So not just a whole photo of just one of just the item itself from the front. Maybe you want to show the back. Maybe you want to show the stitch detail on the band, or maybe you want to show the lace detail in the shawl. And this also allows the knitter to match up what they have on their needles with what you see it's going to look like. Now, in the tech editing stance, like in the tech editing process, you should send photos to your tech editor. It doesn't have to be the ones that you include in the pattern, but it should be the ones that your tech editor can check the sample, that the pattern actually will make the sample. So,
Yes,
like,
please. I mean, I love a laid flat photo of
yes.
whatever it is. I don't even care what kind of item it is, because you really want to make sure that that photo is what the pattern is, that
Hmm.
it's really correct. So I follow along the photo to make sure that it's right. And so, like, it doesn't have to be fancy special, but it
Hmm.
should be accurate representation of the item. So I'm just going to take a break here because Jesse wants to know what that sweater is you're wearing, Sarah.
Hi, Jesse. Thanks for your question. It's Emma by Coco Knits, except I added a giant garter stitch collar because I like to do this with it. So that's, and I did, I knit the Emma because my daughter's name is Emma and I was intrigued by it. So, yeah, that's what makes it. Because the sweater itself doesn't fit super great, because it's a bulky sweater, and it's just a square, a rectangle sweater. But the collar is excellent, and it has fabric pockets here, which is kind of
Oh,
cool.
pockets. I love that.
Pockets. I think every sweater needs pockets, but
Seriously.
that's my own little preference. I love the pockets. So back to photos. Use the photos to give your knitters the information that they need to follow along, to make it work, make what is on their needles match what the sample is, and give them the detail. Don't take a picture from like 20 feet away and throw it
Right.
in the pattern. That's not going to help the knitter. Don't obscure the details by the way that the model is standing or her hair or another accessory. Make sure that you show it in a way that gives the knitter the information that they need. Now, the other thing I would say is when you are advertising your pattern, you can put tons of photos into your web page for the pattern or onto your Ravelry project page, your pattern page. You don't have to include all of those in the pattern. A lot of designers also just make like a photo section of their pattern. They don't put it in with the written instructions. They might put it at the end or at the beginning of the pattern so that the knitter can visually see all the pictures and pull them up on the PDF, but they don't have to print them all. So that's what I suggest doing for
I would just keep in
formatting.
mind that the photos in your patterns, you want them to be the best representation of the item so that the person knows what the knitter knows what they're going to get. But they
Hmm.
also, like Sarah said, these detail sections or things that are important elements, they can help as also they can also be a guide for your knitter. If they're
Hmm.
not sure of something, they can check the picture,
Hmm.
and that can be helpful too. So, and definitely send pictures to your tech editor, even if they're not gorgeous. Just so they're the pictures of the thing that are clearly visible, so that your tech editor can make sure that the sample matches the pattern.
All right, so we got a
Um,
question. Creating me DK, where to put the pictures? How many is a teaser and how to place them in the pattern on the text or on a separate page? So I already answered a little bit of that. That's correct. Really, it's up to you. Think about how would you use the pattern if you were a knitter, using the pattern. If you're only going to be using it digitally, you may just want to keep them. You may want to intersperse some detail photos in the sections that it applies to, like for instance, a picture of the lace next to the lace chart. But for the most part, you don't have to put the patterns in one place. It's really up to you in your formatting, and that's something you can also ask your testers when you do test knit. Definitely ask your knitters, what do you use? Poll them, get some feedback from them, and find out what they would prefer too, because sometimes that can be very valuable information.
I mean, generally, for me personally, I do print patterns out and work from paper. So
Me too.
I probably don't need to print out pictures. So if you have your written instructions, maybe you don't want a picture in the middle of it that someone
Hmm.
is going to have to print out and that's going to waste a lot of space. And they can refer to the pictures on their computer. So
Right.
lots of times I think it's a good idea to not, well, and honestly, just generally, I'm not a fan of interrupting the written instructions. Really not. I like them being together. I don't think it's a good idea to put things in the middle of the written instructions. All your information can be in the front, charts can be where charts need to be, and the photos can be maybe on those pages, but not in the body of the instructions. That's just my personal preference. I think that it just makes I think an interruption in those instructions isn't a good idea.
And that also allows your knitter to just print up the written
Right, just
text,
print up the instructions if that's
and
all they need to print, you know?
and then they can refer to the picture on in a digital format if they needed to.
Right.
So you're talking to two people who love paper. So I'm afraid
Yeah.
we're not we're a little old school in that sense, is that we print
Oh,
everything
okay. What about a photo showing how to do a complicated step? That's a really good question. So
like a
lots of times,
tutorial.
right, lots of times there'll be patterns that have several small photos to show a technique. And what I have noticed about photos like that is they're usually small. So it's not like going to be several pages of these giant photos showing a technique. And sometimes those are helpful to print out because the knitter can have it with them when they're knitting.
Right.
And definitely, I think those are a great idea. I absolutely think those are a great idea. If there's something that you just find, maybe your testers have told you, or maybe your tech editor said the instructions sounded confusing, or you just can't find a really good way to explain it. Pictures, pictures are worth 1,000 words, right? I mean, sometimes you can show a technique in photographs a lot easier than you can write it. And sometimes, and also knitters, the same way that some knitters like knitting from charts and some knitters don't, the same way different knitters learn differently. Like some knitters learn well from pictures and some knitters learn better from words. So I think those are a great idea.
Yeah,
And yeah, and you might want to put them at
definitely.
the end. You might want to put them at the end of your pattern, like see page X for the demonstration of this technique. I wouldn't put them again in the middle of the instructions. Put them at the end of your pattern,
Yeah, and you have to figure out what works best for your pattern too. So definitely
Yeah,
you can
sometimes
do.
there's layout, like you can, I mean,
Yep.
just reality, right? Like not everything's going to be perfect. Sometimes there's layout issues and you need to put things in your pattern in a certain way to accommodate the layout and what you're working with, format you're working with.
Yeah. But pictures can definitely be a huge help, especially in a more complicated, like you said, a more complicated technique. Sometimes pictures can equal 1,000 words, like the old saying says. I definitely agree with a visual demonstration of more complex techniques or even a video demonstration. And videos are becoming easier and easier to do because you can even do them in your stories here in Instagram. You can do them in a reel, or you can do them in other social media formats and embed them on websites easily. So don't be afraid to explore some of these other media to get across the information and also reduce your need for customer service. The more information that you provide your knitter and the more access to techniques and tutorials, then sometimes the better it is for their knitting experience, and it adds a huge amount of value to your pattern.
It does add a lot of value to your pattern, and anything, a lot of designers have told me, they used to get a lot of questions about X, and they found that if they just put up a short little video showing how to do it or added a couple pictures at the end, like I have one designer I work with who has this one particular stitch she really likes and it's not common, and she always in those patterns will put that little photo tutorial at the end of a pattern every single time, and that eliminates a lot of questions that she was getting. Or like a little video tutorial can, you know save you a whole bunch of emails.
Same thing as I mentioned before. So definitely ask your testers during testing process, hey, what would help you through this section
Yep,
better?
yep.
What would,
Those are great ways
if
that your testers can be helpful, asking all kinds of things like that.
ask them questions like, what would you want a tutorial on? Do you feel a tutorial is necessary? Do you think this is superfluous? Just like definitely go to your testers and ask them what they think would work best for this type of technique or whatever. So, all right. So, like we said before, we are happy and here to answer your questions. So, feel free to throw anything into the comments while we're chatting and
Yeah.
answering the questions that we got in messages. We love to answer any questions that you have about knitting tech editing, knitting pattern design, obviously pattern writing. We have lots of opinions, and we're happy to offer them to you free of charge here today.
Yeah, we hand them out for free. If you add a link to YouTube video where, oh, I think that's not a whole question.
Okay, so yeah, finish up your question there, and we'll be happy to answer it. So, the other, which question should we do next, Christina?
How about the yarn question?
Okay, so the other question that we got, if you add a link to
Oh,
YouTube where someone else made the tip, do you ask permission first before putting it into your pattern? I would,
I
just
think it's
as,
just a, I think it's just a decent thing to do. I
that's
mean,
okay.
sometimes it, sorry, question. I mean, I mean, those things are not, I mean, are the videos copyrighted? I mean, so it's so
Videos,
difficult when this is free content, like free content, you know.
yeah, and I don't know all
I
the
really don't know
copyright
that you
issues
always,
related to that, but I think as a common courtesy, if you're going to include somebody else's tutorial and you're going to send traffic to that YouTube video, which is
mm,
what they want, obviously they want people to see it. It's just a common courtesy to send a little note and say, hey, would you mind if I use your tutorial in my pattern? Here is the pattern that I'm going to be using. And is that
yeah, I mean, I
okay?
think it's just like she said, common courtesy to do that, but I also don't. I mean, if this is like free content, that's out on the internet for all the world to see, you maybe
Hmm.
don't have to. You know,
Hmm.
you just might want to. Very Pink Knits is very generous about allowing use of her videos. I send her a copy of the finished pattern as a thank you.
That's
Oh, that's
great.
nice.
That's great. And so this is another way that you can reach out to other designers and collaborate too.
Right.
It's okay to make those connections. And if they say no, then they say no and you find something else or make your own. But I think just as a general rule, if you are referencing somebody else's technique, now no technique can be copyrighted.
Right. They're like
However,
recipes, you know.
it's like a recipe, but the video or the book or the pattern that it's in is copyrighted material. So while a technique can't be copyrighted, that video is copyrighted. So you should just send as a common courtesy, just ask. Always ask, it never hurts. So
Yeah.
great question. So the other question, we have two more questions to cover. Feel free to add more into the comments if you have any. The query that we got was what is the role of measuring yarn by weight in patterns? So in the introductory material of a pattern, you might have a list of materials. And under yarn, it might say 220 yards, 100 okay, is it 190 meters? I can't remember. I can't do the conversion in my head per 100 grams skein. So a lot of times some patterns will not give you yardage needed to complete the pattern in that size, but they'll say a garment requires 250 grams. And that detail is becoming more and more common in some North American patterns, not just in European patterns. So what does this really mean was the question we got. Does it matter? And can I ignore it? So
So
go ahead.
if a sweater does say, like if that's the only information you're given about the yarn that it requires 250 grams, you need to know grams of what weight of yarn,
Mm-hmm.
because a 100-gram skein of worsted weight yarn is going to have less yardage than a 100-gram skein of lace weight yarn.
Exactly.
And so one of the reasons I think people will give the yardage and the weight as the yarn information in their patterns is it's helpful for people who want to know what weight yarn it is. I mean, you need to know what weight yarn you're using, and that's a way to know. That's a way to know that. So if you're substituting yarn, you're not going to use the exact same yarn dictated in the pattern, and you're going to use a different yarn. Knowing how many yards to how many ounces or grams is how you're going to know what weight yarn you need to choose.
Exactly.
And if it's only given in weight, hopefully it says 250 grams of worsted weight yarn or
Exactly.
something, because you'll need to know that difference. Our short row
Oh,
choice just by preference, for example, German instead of Japanese, or are specific types better for tasks, say one for shawls and one? Well, that depends on the designer, depends on the knitter. There's lots of different ways to work short rows, and there are different reasons why you might choose one or another, that will make a difference in how your design looks.
and it depends on
So,
the yarn.
it,
Some yarn and some stitch patterns look better with one short row technique than in another.
right. And sometimes there's sometimes, like for a wrap and turn, for example, um, it's, if you don't pick up those wraps, it's going to leave a little stitch, right? And sometimes that's an element you might like. Sometimes it's not. The way the short rows come out looking might be a designer choice because they prefer the look of it. And but the knitter, they're going to do whatever they want. So a knitter might prefer to work short rows a different way, and there's lots of different reasons why you might use one or the other. I seem to see it's really a preference thing, don't you think, Sarah? It's really a
It's
preference.
completely preference, and it's designer preference. It's your
Mm,
design. You decide which short row technique you want to use. Just make sure you
absolutely.
instruct it correctly in the pattern.
Hmm.
So if you're giving instructions for a German short row, then make sure you tell the knitter that they're going to turn first before they perform the double stitch.
Right.
So that's where it's important, is how you instruct it. It really doesn't matter which one you do.
The
They really,
instructions do need to be correct, though, because the number of
mm-hmm,
stitches will be different depending on which short row style you're working.
yep,
So
exactly.
make sure it's
This,
clear what style of short row needs to be done before they get into the numbers.
and just make sure it's clear. And it's, if a knitter chooses when they're knitting your pattern to use a different method, that's totally okay. It doesn't matter in that sense, because it will probably also depend on the kind of yarn that they use, as to how a short row appears or doesn't appear. So preference, it's definitely just preference, and it's all okay. All right, the last question that we got was, if a designer wants to do the grading themselves, can a tech editor just check the math? Or is it a bad idea for a designer to do all their own grading? So let's define some terms here first.
Yeah,
Uh,
good idea.
um, Grading is taking the sample size of the design, like the first size that was knit that the pattern's based on, and then doing all the calculations and all the written instructions for the knitter to be able to knit that sample in any size that you decide to offer. So grading is sizing. It's changing from one size to multiple sizes in the pattern. So what do you think? You want to jump in?
So I'm a tech editor, right? So I'm a knitting tech editor. I don't offer grading services. So all, 90% of the patterns I edit have been graded by the designers themselves. That
Mm-hmm.
last 10% has been graded by a professional grader or tech editor who offers grading, and I am checking that grade for that grader or tech editor, and their grading or somebody else's design. So I mostly work with designers who grade their own patterns, and it's either way is fine, right? If you
Exactly.
want to grade your own patterns, fantastic. And your tech editor will be able to check the grade to make sure that the sizing is correct and that your ease is applied correctly, to make sure that the fit is good. And if you don't feel comfortable grading, or it's something you don't know how to do, there are people who you can hire to do that for you. And yes, and if you do your own grading, yes, the tech editor will check all
Mm-hmm.
those things that relate to the grading. And if you don't want to grade it or can't grade it, there are people who you can hire to grade your pattern. And I think that if you're going to hire someone to grade your pattern, anything that is important to you about the design, you need to tell them, because there's a lot of creative design work that happens in the grading process. Like while a designer is grading their pattern, they're making decisions the whole time about fit. They're making decisions about how they want the neck to be, the arm to be, the sleeve to be, everything to be. right? And they have to make subtle changes to the numbers for each size to get that fit that they want and make sure that ease is applied correctly. So if you have particular fit concerns or things, style, fit, design that you want in your pattern, tell the person you hire to do the grading what you want these things to be. You know, give
Exactly.
them all the information you can think of that they could need to make sure that the sweater is going to fit the way you intend. But either way, it's totally fine.
Absolutely. So there's a number of different ways to approach the need to size a pattern to put it into multiple sizes. Now, I offer the service of grading. So, I tech edit people's patterns and check their grading. We like check the math of it, but I also can grade a pattern. So, if a designer doesn't feel like they have enough skills to do it, they can send it to me and I will make it into multiple sizes. But to get there, I have to get my whole head into their design process. I have to figure out what their preferences are for fit, what their preferences are for I ask a whole slew of questions to try to make sure I understand what they want it to look like in each of the sizes. And that takes some time. So really, the best scenario is not to have someone else grade it for you, but for you to grade it and to learn how to grade it. So you have a couple of options. I offer a
Oh,
grading course.
let me
Oh,
just
so ahead.
interject for a minute.
Yes.
If you do grade your own patterns, I mean, that's why I think she's saying it's obviously the best. It's probably the best choice because you're going to have more control over your design. You're going to have more control over your pattern, decisions that get made, and you're going to get what you want, right? The more
Right.
if you do the grading yourself, because there are a lot of it is still a creative process to do that grading. But while you're learning, or if you're not sure how to do it,
Yeah.
there definitely are people who can help you. Okay, sorry, I interrupted.
No, that's totally fine. But what I was going to say is, I've had some clients that felt like they didn't have enough confidence to grade their own designs, and so they worked with me for a few times while I graded it them for them. And then they were able to learn how to do it themselves. So grading may take some time to learn how to do, but it's a super valuable process for you as a designer because like Kristina said, then you have more control over the end result and you understand the grading. So then you understand the decisions that you made in order to grade it and you can answer your own customers' questions if the time came that you needed to answer questions about
Well, and I think the
something.
more that you understand about what it is to grade and how it's done is going to make you just
It's going to make you a better designer.
a better informed and more confident designer in the first place because you're
Yeah.
going to know what you can do. You'll know
Right.
more of what you can get away with, what you can do, what you maybe can't do, what will work for just different kinds of construction based
Right.
on all your knowledge about how that sample is going to grade out, right?
Yes.
So it's only gonna add to not just your grading skills, but your skills as a designer, and might be
Right.
even inspiring because you might learn some things,
Mm-hmm.
that will inspire you to design in a different way that you hadn't considered. I mean, I just think it opens up
Mm-hmm.
a whole nother blah, avenue. I can't think of the word. Whole nother section of designing that, could only be beneficial.
Right. So here's the thing, shameless plug. If you go to the links in my profile, I do have a link to a grading course that will be opening up in the spring, where there's three teachers, myself, Melissa Metzbauer, and Julie Robinson. And we teamed up together to present how to grade. And we also provide a whole community of support and practice to learn how to grade. Jill Wolcott, Wolcott, she also provides an extensive grading course. And I'm almost positive that Tian Cunningham does, but
Yep, she has it's pattern
she
grading
has
made easy, I think is the name of her
pattern
course.
grading made easy. So there's a lot of available information out there, and you can actually learn just from doing some reading. And I have those links in a highlight in my profile. So feel free to jump in and ask me questions if you want to know more about grading your own designs. Um,
Thanks,
thanks,
Jesse.
thanks, Jesse. Bye. Thanks for being here.
And we got a
The
question. Oh, you
Okay,
ran out.
I have one more thing to mention. You mentioned the question was, can the tech editor just check the math? And yes, that is always a part of a good tech editor's process is to check the grading. So this is also why it's important when you send your pattern to a tech editor, make sure you let them know what size chart you use to grade and
Yes.
also what
Yes.
is
Good
important,
point.
like Christina said about the fit, so that they can double check, oh yeah, that is, he or she did get there with
Thanks,
that
Josephine,
design
for taking that
intention.
in.
Thanks, Josephine. I appreciate that. All right. I think we covered
No,
that.
that's a really good point. Do make sure you tell your tech editor what sizing chart you used, because they're going to need to know that to check the grade against and make sure your
Right.
eases are good and your sizes are good. So yeah, definitely
And
let them know.
if you need someone to grade a pattern for you, I offer that as a service. There are other people who do offer that as a service. I know Josephine Kush does, she's here. And there are a ton of other tech editors. So feel free to ask me if you need a referral for someone to help you tech edit, or even to kind of hold your hand through the first, or if you need someone to help you grade your pattern, or if you need someone to hold your hand as you learn through the process. So we're definitely, we're here to help you with referrals if you need it too.
Yeah, we absolutely can refer you to somebody who can help you grade your pattern. So definitely ask if that's what you need.
So our question was, which comes first, tech editing or test knitting? I think we've covered this before, but definitely a great
Super
question.
opinionated about this.
We are so opinionated. Sorry. um, we think
Tech editing should come
tech
first.
editing. Test knitting needs to come after tech editing.
Because if you have a lot of questions you need to ask your testers. There's a lot of things you want to know, how they like things, how the fit is, what they need from your pattern, how they experience your pattern. There's a lot of things they can help you with. And if you give them a bad pattern full of errors, they're going to have to weed through all of that and not, be able to be focused on the questions you have for them.
That's
You
right.
always, I think, always want to give your testers the best pattern you can with, as few mistakes as possible, so that it's the best that pattern can be. So they're working from good material to be able to address all the things that, the testing is for. Now, I realize lots of testers are going to be able to catch errors, but keep in mind, a tester's only working one size, right? So they might
Right.
catch an error in their size. Someone else might catch an error in their size, but they're not going to know the relationship between the mistakes. They might not even be in the same place, and it might be more confusing information for you instead of errors caught, right?
Right.
Because it could be part of a bigger picture. I just, obviously, like I said, I'm very opinionated about it, but I think you definitely want to have your pattern tech edited first so that you can give your testers the best pattern that you can so they can do what they need to do with your pattern.
And if your testers are volunteering to knit your pattern as a preview and to help you like decide fit or to decide what if the pattern works for them or not, they're volunteering. Do not
Right.
require them to find errors for you. That should be something that someone gets paid for. It's a skill. Tech editing requires a lot of practice, some training, and also requires a certain kind of experience in the knitting realm. And it's better to have someone who has some experience tech editing, because they'll be able to see things that a test knitter won't look for or won't even know to look for. And they're going to be looking at the pattern as a whole, as
Exactly.
like globally. And they're going to be looking at consistency. They're going to be looking at whether or not your numbers are correct across the board, how they're related to each other. And all of this can be done ahead of time so that you give your testers the best pattern that you can, and then the testers can actually find things that a tech editor wouldn't, because they're working it on the needles. And there are some things the tech editors can't see until it's on the needles. It's just the way it works. So testing and tech editing are two companions. They should work in tandem, and they're part of a whole process of the pre-publication process that you should have as a designer. They're both extremely valuable, but they do two different things.
Yeah,
So this is a great question. Thank you for asking that. I
it's a great
appreciate it.
question.
So do we have any other questions? I think we covered everything that we got in messages. So if you have any questions for us tech
Yeah, I
editors,
wasn't being super patient this time. I saw a question. I jumped right into answering it when we weren't we were still talking. I think we got everything and we answered what we got ahead of time. So,
yes,
yay.
we did. So if you guys have any questions for us before we sign off, feel free to throw it into the comments and we'll do our best to answer now. Anything about knitting, pattern writing, or design. So just as kind of an update of what's happening with us, last summer we did a whole series of tech tip talks with specific topics, and we answered a bunch of your questions. And right now we are in the process of transcribing and rewriting all of those tech tip talks, because our goal is to be able to give you guys a written item, like a ebook or
Like a
even
book.
a book
Book.
that with everything that we have talked about already and everything that's in our head, to give you guys as designers the best information that we can to help you in the tech editing process to get you ready for tech editing. So we've made a free pre-tech edit checklist, and it's in our profiles. You're welcome to come sign up for that and download it. That will help you to reduce your tech editing costs, we hope.
A checklist before you send your pattern off to be tech edited is a great idea. There are things you can look for before you send it that will save you money that you might not think of to check.
Right.
There's also a link. Like Sarah said, we are working on this book for you guys. So if you want to find out where we are with that and anything we're doing with the tech tip Q&A, there's also a link in my bio to sign up for our newsletter. So we're going to be sending that out monthly to keep you guys updated on what's going on. So definitely go do that. And if you download the PDF for the tech tip, the checklist, it will also let you sign up for the newsletter also. And you're welcome. You guys are welcome.
And if you guys are on our as a newsletter subscriber, then you're going to be informed first when the book is available and when we're launching it. So just so all that's happening in the background, we didn't realize that writing a book is a huge amount of work. I think we were overly optimistic that it would take less time than it is. But we're having a good time working through it and making sure that we give you guys the best information possible.
Yeah.
So
we're not gonna we want to make sure it's good.
Yeah. We don't want to give you anything that isn't useful. So yes, it is fantastic, Amy. We're really excited about it. And we're glad that our answers were helpful for you. We thank you that you were able to be here with us. We are here every third Monday at noon Eastern time to answer your questions. You can send us questions anytime you want.
Well, the third Monday of the month.
Third Monday of the month.
Right.
We are here on my Instagram Live to answer your questions. And then I post this video on my YouTube channel so you can rewatch it. And if you need captions, they're there.
And the YouTube link, the link to watch our Tech Tip Talks on YouTube is in our bios also.
Right.
So you can find those on YouTube.
Feel free to go back and rewatch some of our previous Tech Tip Talks. And feel free to send us a question anytime in a message or in an email. Just contact us through our profile links.
Yep, you can message us any questions. So the next Tech Tip Q&A will be February 15th. Monday, February 15th.
Monday at noon, and we'll see you guys then. So I think that's everything. Are we done?
I think that's everything.
All right. You guys have a great week. Be safe. Be healthy. Happy knitting. Happy designing.
Happy knitting. Happy designing.
Take care of yourselves. Bye.
Bye, guys.